Start. Just done a minute before.
And welcome to this meeting of the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee. I am Rob Mercer, MLC, Chair of this committee, and with me are Chris Thomas, MHK, and Diane Kelsey, MLC. And today we are meeting with representatives of the Manx Utilities Authority. For the purposes of Hansard, I would ask that just one person speaks at a time. Welcome all. For the benefit of Hansard, could you please introduce yourself, including your title and how long you've been in post? I think perhaps we should start on the left.
Peter Reid, political member for Manx Utilities, Vice Chairman and also Chair of the Audit Committee.
John Monneberg, MHK, Chair since November 23.
Phil King, Chief Executive since Manx Utilities formation in 2014, and then held a number of roles for Manx Electricity before that.
Hello, I'm Adrian Dobbins. I'm one of the Executive Directors at Manx Utilities. I'm responsible for our power system. I've been an Executive Director since 2005, as you know, within the MEA and then the MUA.
Hi, I'm Simon Clegg. I'm the Finance Director and I've been in post 10 years.
That's great, thank you very much. We'll just start off with a general topic, really. We last took oral evidence from the MUA in February 2023. Could you give us just an overview of the key developments that have taken place since then? And please include what you would see as your biggest accomplishments in that time.
Shall I start? Okay. So I think when we saw you in 2023, that was at the time of just after the energy crisis. That was a challenging time for us, well, for the whole island, really. We were, at the time, faced with a difficult situation in terms of energy pricing. Gas prices, wholesale gas prices had gone through the roof, something we'd never seen before in the previous 10 years. Although we were responsibly and heavily hedged, well out, even on the unhedged portion, the prices we were faced with were quite extraordinary. So we approached the council ministers as a key stakeholder and advised that we were going to have to do something with the price. We were directed at the time that wasn't to be the case in the public interest, so our prices were frozen. And as a result of that, we had quite strong financial resilience at the time, but we had to dive into our reserves. I think we took 25 million out of our reserves. We, at the time, the whole industry was in turmoil. I think around 30 supply companies in the UK ceased trading. They were either undercapitalised or not hedged. We were in that position. We had financial resilience. Having said that, we couldn't do that again. So a big part of the last 2 years has been trying to build up that financial resilience again, maintain service standards and help our customers with the standards of supply that we offer, and working closely with our customers who were in similar situations. So that's been a really big challenge for us over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, obviously, we've been faced with a new world in terms of an investment phase. So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of surveys and feasibility studies to assess the current status, which has changed again since 2023, and work out an optimum investment pathway for Manx Utilities going forward to address climate change, but at the same time maintain resilient supplies, secure supplies in an affordable way. So that's been the real big challenge for us over the last couple of years.
That's great, thank you. Chris?
Oh, thank you, Chair. And perhaps through the Chair might carry on with Mr King, or perhaps pass over to the Finance Director. But wanted to ask about that £25 million loss from the energy crisis, from the price crisis. You know, plain looking at the 22-23 financial year would suggest that your overall reserves fell by more than 40 million.
Yeah.
And your bond repayment fund fell by more than 20 million. Yeah. So just so we can put this, you know, to bed once and for all, you know, how much did the direction from Council of Ministers cost in terms of the overall financial reserves, in terms of the gas price and not passing it on to electricity consumers? What was it, the 25 million that you allege, or was it, or is it the 60 million, which looks like from the straight looking at the annual reports?
For accurate information, may I pass that over to you, Simon?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say it's closer to the 25 million than the 60 million.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we got the direction from council, there was a motion which went through Tynwald for a £26 million loan. The value of that loan was based on the expected loss we would incur from that price freeze at that time. And as you say, that year's financial statements had a loss of 23 million, 20 to 25 million, something like that, off the top of my head. So that was the impact of that decision washing through. As you say, our reserves dropped. The bond repayment fund value dropped because we took 25 million out of it across, I think it was across 3 transactions, to support our cash position, because obviously we were paying significantly more for the energy than we'd budgeted for and had allowed for on our income.
So just, I think it's not really fair to keep pressing on this, but perhaps it would be helpful to give us a written submission so we can use our report, any report we do, to put that issue to bed once and for all, exactly how that all works through.
Okay.
And the other one I was just going to ask is, it's good news that the bond repayment fund is now going up.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but notice in the last annual report I've got access to, because obviously one's about to come out, the Consolidated Loans Fund borrowing went up at the same time as the bond repayment fund went up. So I'm thinking, you know, can it be important to know whether or not more money is just being borrowed to put into the bond repayment fund.
So money is not being borrowed to put into the bond repayment fund. The reason the bond repayment fund is going up, firstly, is because the contributions we make into that fund have significantly increased. So the target value or target figure for contribution this year was 15.5 million, which we made, I think, in July. So we've gone from a few years ago putting £1.5 million a year into that fund to putting 12.5 million, as I say, now up to 15.5 million. I think that number is due to rise to 18.5. Okay. And in terms of the borrowings going up, that's more to do with some of our asset investments coming through. So one of the big things we're doing at the moment is investing in the water network, and we've gone from low millions to I think we're targeting about £6.5 million a year to replace ageing water mains, and then we've obviously got other things like wastewater treatment works coming through.
It'd be great to add that into the briefing that we get, so we can try and actually get these proper handle on them for the public.
Great. Mm-hmm. Just looking forward to the sort of next 2 to 5 years. You know, what are the main priorities? Looking in that kind of timescale.
So the main priorities are to continue providing a high standard of service to our customers. So the business as usual, what we fundamentally do for the Isle of Man, that must be delivered uncompromised. The big changes over the coming years are a change to investment profile. So we're coming to or approaching the end of one big investment phase, and we need to work out exactly what we're going to be doing over the next sort of 10 to 20 years to address all the climate change issues, ageing infrastructure, changes in legislation, all those issues. If we break it down into roughly 3 areas, obviously the energy transition is big. That's a big new challenge for us. We need to complete the regional sewerage treatment strategy. We're nearly at the end of that, so we'll do that in the next few years. And then, as our FD has just mentioned, we need to maintain a resilient water supply system, monitoring leakage levels. I think that at the moment the 1,000 kilometres plus of water pipes, the average age is around 60 years. Just to stand still, we need to replace about 10 kilometres or £6 million worth a year. I think it's that sort of order. So again, that's is really over the next 2 to 5 years, as you've asked. That's going to be a key focus point for water.
Yeah, that investment profile you mentioned there, is that related to the MUA's medium-term financial plan? Has that had much of a change since we last spoke about it?
It's been refined. So what we do is we have a kind of strategic session with the board and the executive that looks forward probably 20 or beyond years at really big things, water treatment plants, things like that. And then so we can make provision of things that we know we're going to have to do sometime in the future. But we really close down on the front 5 years and fine-tune that. So what I would say is that since we last reported to you, we will have closed down on almost a project-by-project basis exactly what we'll be doing in those front years.
I mean, would it be possible for the committees to see that refreshed?
It's effectively covered through our submission into the pink book, isn't it? So so you'll see all the detail as that's submitted through the Treasury. Just that's open to public scrutiny anyway. But if you need more information, absolutely we can if you tell us exactly what you're after, we can supply that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just follow up on that then, because obviously financial plans, not formally submitted by departments and so on. So exactly which document have you just referred us to, just so we know?
The pink book.
Certainly the pink book.
Our long-term engineering plan would be the document internally that we use to plan through the next 25 years.
I think it is different for statutory boards compared to departments, but this year we had a different way around because we have such close attention paid.
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, so there's 2 key documents we do with the board internally. One is we have a long-term investment plan, which is engineering based. It's obviously a capital intensive industry. And then that feeds through to the second key document, which is the long-term financial plan. Okay. And then aspects of that get taken out and submitted in appropriate format to the Treasury's pink book.
Then that's the chair difference. I think we're looking for the submission you made to Treasury, ideally.
Okay, that's great. Lovely. All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Thomas is going to take the next section, which is the topic is energy independence.
Okay.
The first question was, how resilient is the island's energy system to shocks, and are there any particular risks that threaten our energy security?
Okay, so just breaking that down a little bit, obviously price is a big thing, so price shocks, and that's what we see, and I think we touched on that before. Mm-hmm. We use a range of strategies to forward buy and introduce certainty into pricing for ourselves and for customers. Mm-hmm. So that policy or that hedging strategy has been refined over recent years as the market volatility has changed. So independence from volatile pricing, we've got covered to a large degree. Mm-hmm. In terms of physical security, what we have at the moment, and we've had for a long time, is basically 3 asset classes or 3 different types of generation or power production that can meet the island's demand. So without any, pretty much we can meet the island demand on one of them. So we've got those extra layers of security. So those comprise the subsea cable, the CCGT plant, which is gas-fired, but it's actually dual-fueled. It can switch to oil as a backup. And thirdly, we have an obsolete diesel fleet, which has been very well maintained. It still works well as a third layer, really. And yeah, that's still available. We still have the skills to run it, and it's there for extra security. So that's pretty strong still. So we lose any one of those, and we test things all the time. So obviously we'll do maintenance on each one of those. So we'll make sure that the others provide the supply security.
Mr. Kelsey?
Yeah, it was just linking to the diesel side of it.
Yeah.
How long, if that was the only one, how long would we last for? But obviously other things might change, but
Indeed.
how long could we run for?
Okay.
What would be your estimation, either from the equipment or from the availability of the input fuel?
Can I
So if you're talking specifically about the diesel engines, they're still all available to us. And if you mean how long could we run if we had nothing else available to us, with fuel stocks would be about 2 weeks, during the winter, probably longer during the summer.
That's right, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, just on I suppose it's an engineering question, is how much longer do you think those diesels can be maintained for?
Well, they've been a really, really strong asset for us. They're still available to us. They provide a very important service to us, in something we call black start. So if ever the island did ever have a complete island blackout, we would use those engines to start. They've been obsolete for a while in terms of the technology. Obviously, new technology has moved on. But they can still run on the fuel we use today, and they can run in the future on clean fuels. So the issue probably would be how available are spare components for them? Are they supported by industry? But at the moment, we're seeing them being available well into the next decade.
Okay, thank you. Up to you, Mr. Thomas.
So do I understand then that the only two aspects of the resilience that you're concerned about are price and physical security of the generating assets, or is there are there other things in the energy system that are susceptible?
So in terms of independence, within the industry, I think with what's happened since the energy crisis and the geopolitical position, there's a complete new way of looking at it now.
Mm-hmm.
And increasing the amount of homegrown, home-consumed energy is seen as a very positive move if you are to increase your resilience and your independence from external physical shocks. So that is very clear in the government's energy strategy, and I think that's about to be represented to Tynwald sometime soon. And that's a basic core principle, not just for the Isle of Man, but I think for many countries in Europe, is that there is an aspiration to increase, make use of your own abundant natural resources if you can, of which the Isle of Man has many. So that's another aspect.
Okay, great. I'm sure we'll come to some of those things later on, and noting down some of the answers. So you called it government's energy strategy, so I've just changed the first part of my next question. So government's energy strategy identifies investment in onshore renewables as a way to reduce reliance on imported energy, just as you suggested, with the potential for an additional 25% to 33% of annual demand to be met from island sources, while continuing to use the interconnector for the remainder. From your perspective, what is required to deliver this level of additional on-island generation?
But there's a number of facets, isn't there, to that question. So obviously funding is one, because we obviously need to prepare and properly prepare business cases to make sure that we can deliver on the things that we propose. Yeah. Proper evaluation of all of those solutions. I'm just trying to think just remind me of the question again.
Well, the final question is what is required to deliver 25 to 33% of annual demand from island sources? Yeah,
so skills, and we need strong service in terms of the manufacturers. We need those to have components available to us. And we need to make sure that all of our solutions actually knit together very, very well. so that we end up with a resilient system as we have today.
Okay. Well, because we haven't seen the energy strategy, but it is due for debate in November, so we should be seeing it soon. But you feel that the energy strategy that we'll see in Tynwald in November will be sufficient for us to have a good idea of all of that sort of material, do you?
I think it will definitely provide more clarity on the current situation and a favoured pathway.
Yeah.
I was actually referring to the last the last publication, which I think was probably about a year ago.
Last November, yeah.
Yes, and I think within that there are a number of core principles, and I just recall one of them being making optimum use of our abundant on-island renewables.
Okay, well, to be completely clear then, last year's, the main thing that I got from it was, next year would be much better because it would have been costed and there would have been funding alternatives and there would have been evaluation of alternatives. So, I asked the question again, do you believe, because you, at one point when you first started talking, you talked about the optimum investment pathway, that they were your words, optimum investment pathway. Will we see in the November 2025 energy strategy from the government, MUA's view of the optimum investment strategy for energy independence and energy security?
I think what you'll see is a statement on the current situation and the previous plan. The assumptions that were made to devise a pathway then, they've changed. So with the current situation, there are a number of options available to us to achieve that outcome.
Yep.
And I think you'll see that, and perhaps a hint at the favoured pathway, but we're at the precipice of a major investment programme. We're at the front end of a major investment programme. It is really important for the Isle of Man that is based on current information, and once we press the button on that investment profile and start spending real money, it's the best pathway that we can devise. At the same time, we need to meet these targets that have been set. But obviously this is a 2050 target for the whole energy sector. Electricity only represents 25% of it. So can we keep options open for the future to enable us to capitalise on new technologies that are emerging or will emerge, and they will become commercialised? So when I say the optimum, if you look at the front end, once you've set a target, you have to invest in technologies that are going to work, that are proven to meet that target. But if you've got a much more distant target, you can take a more open-minded view as to when you choose to capitalise on a particular technology.
I hear you. And this is all very complicated, and we've only got a limited amount of time today, and I think the Chair just agreed that once we have more of a feel for what's in the energy strategy, it would probably be good to have a separate session, another additional session about just this, to test some of the things, if that's okay. I think would that be all right?
Of course.
Good. And I think just one thing to establish, I think there's been a clear statement from the Treasury Minister that the onshore wind farm isn't as yet funded. The decisions have got to be made. But I hear in places that you've gone quite a long way along a financial lease arrangement because obviously you've got to get in supply lines. So it would be very helpful, because there's obviously lots of misinformation in this space. It'd be quite good to hear from the MUA that the Treasury Minister is right. Tynwald will be involved in making a decision about it.
Absolutely. I think all we've done now is really done some surveys to help us with an environmental impact assessment to enable us to make a plan application. There was, if we wanted to do it particularly quickly, then you would have to make financial commitments up front and book manufacturing capacity and make commitments. None of that's happened. All that financial risk has come out. So I can categorically say that we've not made any of those commitments, and the process we will follow at the insistence of our own board and executive will be, and we have to follow financial regulations. Major Projects Board of Treasury are looking at this in detail. Treasury will look at it, Energy Policy Board, Council of Ministers, and it will ultimately end up with Tynwald.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question I've got is, in your view, would total energy independence be either desirable or achievable, you know, and you sort of hinted at that. So it sounds like to date you've given us the answer. You do think it's desirable, but to put the counter argument, you know, you have an interconnector into the northwest of England, you have a gas supply from the UK, so we haven't had total independence in the past, and you know, 85,000 makes us equivalent to a small Lancashire town. Not each Lancashire town needs to be energy independent. So I'll repeat the question, is total energy independence desirable or achievable?
If it could be achieved economically and securely, then would that be a great target, wouldn't it, that total independence? But this is a long journey, as I said, so I think we've started the journey, and there are many more technologies that may be able to contribute, that may become available in the future.
Thank you. And go on.
So do you want to...
And then finally then from me, how is Manx Utilities feeding into the roadmap for the transformation of the island's power systems? Is it DEFRA's roadmap, or is it MUA's roadmap, or is it a government's roadmap? And who's responsible for costing all the elements of that roadmap?
I think it's an amalgam of all of those things. I think it wouldn't be sensible, would it, for DEFRA not to consult with us? And we have proposed a number of solutions which can achieve the 2030 targets. As you rightly point out, it's for them to actually present that case. What we've been doing is spending time evaluating the various options, coming up with levelised costs of energy for each of the solutions, discussing that with our colleagues in DEFRA, and I think it's sensible to appraise all of the options open to us and make sure we're making the right investment at the right time.
Okay. So, you know, I've got my notes here what the DEFRA minister said when she was with us a few months ago about, you know, that same question, and so there's no big differences between you. You're working together. DEFRA will submit it. Treasury, Tim Wood will fund it, and you feel as if your voice is very important in presenting options and evaluating options.
Absolutely, and I think there's good collaboration. So although we don't set policy, we input information so that it can be informed as possible, sensible policy decisions.
That's great. We'll move on now to the next topic, I think, which is energy infrastructure. Mrs. Kelsey.
Thank you. I suspect that Mr. Dobbins will be answering this, but I'll put them through the chair and the chief of the executive. So I suppose really we talk about change, but actually is our existing energy infrastructure sustainable? And I know you've touched on that bit, but also what role will it play as we go through the transition? So talk about existing and how it will last.
Yeah, please.
I think it's important to make sure that we've spent a lot of money on our existing infrastructure, and it's important to look at it and see what its capabilities are and integrate it into whatever the new solutions are. I mean, ultimately it might mean that the assets aren't used in exactly the same way, but we certainly see some value, as we've already mentioned, in the way the interconnector can provide security of supply, how our power stations will provide definitely resilient solutions going forward, and integration with new renewable technology is part of the process. We also think that as we get a high penetration of renewables onto our grid system, and remember this, it's a fairly small grid system, you actually need to be able to accommodate all of that renewable technology, be it what we've invested or what the private sector have invested. And part of that process that we believe needs to happen is some form of storage system, so stored energy, which will help, to use your phrase, protect us against shocks.
Thank you. And because we didn't specifically talk about it, I would then go to say, so what are the plans for the Pulrose power station going forward?
The CCGT part of it.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, well, I mean, the CCGT plant plays a hugely important role in the way we produce and supply electricity on the Isle of Man today. In the main, it's currently cheaper to run the power station when it's running in combined cycle mode than to import electricity. And it's important for us to maintain those assets so that they can deliver that benefit to the consumer right the way through to the end of the decade. As I say, beyond that point, with the current climate change targets, we might have to use that plant in a different way. but it is already capable of running on liquid fuel, and the future fuel that the power station could use could be green HVO type fuel.
So I have a supplementary here, but it sort of links into that. So do you have any decommissioning plans? I mean, obviously, eventually it has to be, but do you have any if somebody said we need to decommission it, are there any decommissioning plans yet? Or from what you've said, it sounds like it's part of your future solution. But
yeah, I think it's important to note that when the power station was built in 2003, it had a sort of technical life probably of target technical life about 30 years, but we've been investing in the infrastructure within it all through that period of time, and the financial life was probably set to be the same, but beyond the financial life, the assets can still be used. So we haven't particularly set aside any targets to decommission the CCGT plant at this moment in time.
okay, thank you, thanks very much.
Can I I'm just, that liquid fuel, I think now you've raised it, we need to ask something more about it. So is that the same as, Islands Energy Group could stop taking gas through your pipeline and just bring it in by boat to their things, or is it a different type of liquid fuel? What is it exactly? Now you've mentioned it, I think we probably should know.
Well, I referenced something called HVO, which is hydrogenated vegetable oil. Effectively, it's a vegetable produced version of diesel. Okay. So that's why we know that our diesel engines and our CCGT plant can run on that type of fuel.
Okay.
We probably use it as a sort of resilient backup in that mode, but not as a continuous source of fuel, because as we know today, the cost of that fuel is currently dearer than gas.
Just very specifically in the Pink Book, which you've referenced, I think there's about £10 million of investment in the CCGT before 2030. What's that doing? Is that keeping it going to 2030, or is it preparing for the 2030s, or what's it doing exactly?
In the main, it's keeping. It's what I said earlier. It's you have an efficiency of the power station which is deteriorated by running time. So over a period of time, we do need to, from time to time, replace the gas turbines, and it's so we just change the engines over. So from time to time, that investment is required to maintain the efficiency of the power station.
So by implication then, in the 2030s, if it's still being used, we'll also need £10 million plus inflation.
It would have less fired hours basically. So the investment profile would change.
Okay, so it depends on use.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Also when it starts. So obviously if it starts earlier, it's running longer, and therefore it needs to be reversed.
Yeah, so I think what I've tried to suggest is that there's a potential for it to be running in a different mode, and its fired hours will be different, and therefore its investment profile will be different.
And you mentioned about our network and our electricity grid in particular. Is the capacity of the current electricity grid suitable for our renewable energy goals?
Yes. I can expand if you'd like.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about when the what we call the new power station, but effectively the CCGT plant was first commissioned, the actual peak demand on our island grid was somewhere over 90 megawatts. Today, it's somewhere nearer 70. So you've actually got a whole 20 megawatts of spare capacity in the grid system. What's nuanced and what's different about the future will be the insertion of renewable generation. And so we see already a fair degree of solar, what we call behind the meter, out into the grid system, and that changes the way the power system functions. So voltage profiles change, and our ability to flow power to different parts of the grid system changes as a consequence. So future solutions might include modifying the way we have to make our transformers function to properly allow power flows. So tap changing modifications and things like that.
Just for clarity, I think it might be useful for people listening. We hear this phrase behind the meter and in front of the meter, And I can never remember which way round that is. So I thought I might as well ask the question now while we've got you guys here. So from what you've just said, consumer solar, for example, would be behind the meter.
That's right.
Whereas grid scale solar that you would install
Yes.
and run
Is in front of them.
is in front. Okay. Thank you.
Mine was a very simple one. So you've talked about very eloquently about 90 down to 70 and so on. When we were doing the bus trial, the electric buses are quite big users of electricity. When the minister recently started, we're meeting the Minister of Infrastructure soon, and she's started talking about taking part in the Irish Sea electric ship use. So we'd have a big fat cable to put into our ships. And then we've got potentially medicinal cannabis farms. We've got even more successful data centres. Do you have an estimate of the extra uses that could be coming along with other parts of the transition in terms of electricity usage and what the impact would be? I mean, I didn't even mention cars then. And home heating.
So yeah, it's an interesting topic in terms of where's the strength of our grid, and clearly the strength of our grid is in Douglas. So if you're talking about reinforcing the capability of the sea terminal, it's not too far away from one of our primary nodes, which is Lord Street's substation, and it's where our interconnector comes ashore. In terms of what private sector might build, we obviously know about strategies in the south and the north, and we're in good collaboration with those people about what their aspirations are, and we're quite open to dialogue with them, and we talk to them about what is a sensible level of investment into the grid for them, as basically a seed process to what they might need to develop. So I don't think I could give you a formal megawatt number about what their needs are, any more than I could tell you about how many new data centres might get built.
Well, I suppose what I'm saying is there a number that somebody's got for bus use of electricity with 70 electric vehicles, car use at certain percentages, air source heat pumps with a certain number? Are all those figures, are we going to see them all in the energy strategy?
What we do really is that when those aspirations come along, that we look at, well, where does it need to happen? Do we need to reinforce our grid for that specific connection?
Okay.
Can I just add, I think that is the answer. I think included within our forecasts are a number of assumptions associated with transport change to electric vehicles. There are some assumptions on heating, so things like heat pumps and things like that going forward. Once we get a more definitive transport strategy with all its implications and heating strategies and building strategies, those numbers can be refined going forward. And as Adrian says, we are working close with the departments that have insight and knowledge as to the likely build and investment in key kind of industrial things perhaps, so that we can make sufficient allowance for those going forward in our plans.
Was it Kelsey?
Thank you. So we touched on it earlier. Mr. Thomas picked up on the 10 million in the pink book, and it was very well explained. Thanks, Mr. Dobbins. But more broadly, are life cycle costs routinely factored into plans for new infrastructure, and into the decisions of the viability of keeping existing structure, because that also needs to be maintained? I suppose where I'm coming from, because I'm engineer by background, I'm thinking life cycle costs. Just because you stop doing something, the other thing needs to be kept going, and you're investing in it as well. So we're just really understanding how that strategy works within MUA.
It's interesting. I can give you an analogy which is not part of the energy infrastructure, but our regional sewage treatment strategy phase 2, we took a look at a life cycle cost and did things like net present values for the whole of the 30-year proposed life of the the final solution. So as we mentioned, our long-term engineering plan, that has a sort of 25-year look ahead, and we sort of build in what are the costs of refurbishment within that program. So yes.
I was just going to invite Simon, just from, he's done a lot of modelling on the finance side in respect of levelised costs of electricity, and through the phasing over 25 years or the life of the assets, to answer your question, further down the line there are replacements or extra maintenance costs and things like that, they're kind of included in the in those models. Yeah.
And the reason I was asking the question is very much on the lines of you might want something new and we're going to invest in the new thing. And we might get rid of the old thing, that's fine, but actually you still need to invest in keeping this thing going, or if you decide to have the two things, and we've talked, it all needs maintain. Thank you.
It's a point very well made, yeah. Absolutely, thank you.
If I may, just on that, when you've got, I was thinking of depreciation really, so it's probably more a question for the finance director. If you've expected an asset is going to last 60 years or 50 years, you're depreciating it over that time, I guess. If you have to depreciate it over a much shorter time, what kind of financial impact is that going to have?
So generally it works the other way around. That when a new asset is created, the depreciation period is often ends up being shorter than the asset life. We don't get a gain from being able to extend the depreciation period because generally the circumstances in which you can extend a depreciation period are limited. In an ideal world, the operating life, the financing life and the depreciation period would all match on an asset. In reality, the operating lives are probably the longest of those three. The depreciation periods are usually the shortest and the financing period is somewhere in between. So if we take something like the CCGT plant, the main funding for that is repayable in 2034. If we keep on maintaining it and if we have a viable fuel we can use, then we could run that probably through to 2050 as being our sort of ballpark figure. But the depreciation for the majority of that investment will be fully repaid before we get to 2030.
No less important, but much smaller items we're talking about now is your fleet. So could someone explain to me how you manage, your fleet, and is there anything you are doing in that space that actually can either bring efficiencies or long-term plans for your fleet?
We have a fleet of around 200 vehicles. Around 60 of them are what we would term heavy vehicles, trucks and variations on trucks. We have a highly mobile workforce. A lot of the people we employ we would deem as frontline workers. We obviously have electricity networks, we have water networks, we have gas networks, we have wastewater networks and sub-networks, and in order for people to maintain them, work on them, operate them, they have to be able to get out and about. We obviously have a fault response requirement, we often I would say buy dual purpose vehicles, so most of the time a vehicle will just be driving along roads, going backwards and forwards between places, but we need vehicles which can operate in adverse weather conditions, for the sake of argument. So we're often buying for certain uses vehicles which can respond in those situations, but 90% of the time they don't need those capabilities. But there's no point buying a bunch of panel vans and then when it snows they can't move. Historically, we've worked closely with the DOI, so most of our procurement goes through the DOI under their purchasing arrangements. From a maintenance perspective, more recently we've moved away from the DOI, and our maintenance is now split across three private organisations, largely based on vehicle type. As an electricity provider, needless to say, we're keen on electrifying the fleet. We have some electric vehicles, but we've struggled with a lot of our vehicles in terms of what is out there on the market, which we can get. So things like four-wheel drive vehicles, there's not cost-effective electric solutions for the types of vehicles we're often buying, so we're able to pull 3.5 tonnes. Our heavy vehicles, there's not cost-effective electric solutions for them at the moment. And probably the final thing I was going to say was different vehicles have different life expectancies. So trucks, we might expect to get 10 years out of them. Some of our more specialist heavy vehicles, we might be expecting to get 15, 16 years out of them. Smaller vans, we might be expecting to get between 5 and 7 years. So
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because of the size of our fleet, we actually need a skilled person to operate and manage the fleet. It's something that we need to have is an operator license called an O license. So it also within that license requires us to keep our larger vehicles in effectively depots overnight, and but it's something that's a new requirement really, that you've got to have somebody skilled in the management of your fleet, and we do.
Okay, thank you. If you can just indulge me, just one thing, something that the finance director picked up. I think we probably would all say, and I'm speaking on behalf of the chairman here, but the work that your teams do when they go out and about after a storm, we had Storm Amy last week and others, I think we would probably want to say, well done to the teams that are out there, because
Absolutely.
I think that is something we should recognise.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So going from individual vehicles or small vehicles, now something a lot bigger, what is the life expectancy of the existing interconnector?
That again, multifaceted answer. I'm sort of thinking that when the interconnector was first commissioned, it had a commercial sort of financial life of about 40 years. We've been extremely careful in the use of that asset, and because of that, it's not been overheated or anything like that. So I would envisage that the cable itself would have a life of at least 60 years. Some of the substation assets may need to be replaced, and in fact our substation at over near Blackpool, a place called Bisham, has just gone through a midlife overhaul. So I've got no qualms about saying that it will definitely meet its initial commercial life, but definitely go beyond it.
Sorry, just quickly going back to the vehicle fleet. So 2 years ago, am I correct in that DOI were the maintenance partner for the fleet, and now that's changed?
yes, it's changed more recently than 2 years ago.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And particular reason for that? Because I mean, the wasn't the idea behind the DOI centralising some of these services, so there'd be some efficiencies there?
Yeah, I think we struggle to see the efficiencies in terms of realising them. So I think in terms of the proposal was valid. I think there's been a number of challenges on the island, and so in an ideal world it was the right thing to do. I think in reality it's not worked out as well as was intended. I would say one particular issue coming to mind is I think the DOI have struggled to find qualified mechanics to help provide the service, and as a consequence of that, the service that we then got from the DOI was not where we wanted it to be, and I think it's probably fair to say not where the DOI wanted it to be, and we've probably spent the last 2.5 years talking with the DOI about some of the issues we'd been experiencing, what we could do to help them as much as to help us, and I think it ultimately got to a place where they wanted to focus on their own fleet, and we probably wanted to have a little bit more leeway around ours. From a financial perspective, one of the challenges is always if you do something a different way, maybe you can save a bit of money. If we have a team of 4 people reliant on a certain specialist vehicle, and that specialist vehicle isn't then available because whatever the reason, it's not available. Often the cost to us of not having that available for a team of 4 people for a day is significantly higher than maybe a cost saving on a part or on a procurement approach.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Just to very briefly, the other part then, which you mentioned, so I've got to pick up on you, is the O licence. So do you think the requirements and the processes you have to work through with as being an O licence operator are okay, or is that something else that DOI should worry about in the future?
We have particular problems with it. So you're probably aware there's 2 levels of licensing. There's what's called VO license, and then there's the operator registration.
Mm-hmm.
And from my understanding, somebody like the DOI will have an operator registration, not an operator license, and we have to have an operator license because in things like storm conditions, we will often send teams away to help out the UK, help out Ireland, and in order for our vehicles to drive on their roads, we have to have the operator licence. But that might apply to 10 of our heavy vehicles. The other 50 of our heavy vehicles, the same requirements fall on them, even though they're not going away and will never do so. And then there's nuances within that, within the regulations and within best practice. So for the sake of argument, there's a best practice that a single transport manager is responsible for 50 vehicles. We have some leeway around that, but we're trying to manage our heavy fleet within 60 purely because of that, because of the O licensing requirements. If we could split our fleet between O licence and operator registration, that would make our lives easier, and it's something we're talking to our TLC about. But at times it feels like it's a structure which works somewhere else, which has been applied here and maybe doesn't fully reflect.
Was there ever the possibility, did you discuss with the possibility with DOI of having, a Bolton style or a Bury style big building where all of these vehicles are done in one place rather than in refurbished buildings in Ellerslie or something like that, and then the O licence? Did you talk about using economies of scales and working together with them? Did that ever happen, or was it just by chance?
We've talked about it. If you sort of say about having all of the vehicles in one place, we don't want all of the vehicles in one place. We want people who live in the south to have a vehicle in the south. We want people who live in the north to have access to a vehicle in the north. So we don't want one of our vehicles parked in every corner, but we do want the vehicles sort of distributed across the island.
So decisions have been made rationally and optimally. It's not just been okay.
I think we need to just move on now to our next question, question 13.
So
Mrs. Kelsey.
Thank you very much.
New interconnect.
Slightly different tack now,
New interconnect.
and it's really because I don't understand this. So, could someone explain how domestic and business customers can benefit from selling back surplus self-generated electricity to the MUA, and then in that answer also what impact does that have on the operational finances or even the operations of the MUA?
Please.
Okay. We have what we call the capital costs of their investment were significantly higher than they might be these days. The UK had what was called feed-in tariffs, which was effectively a government grant based on how much you exported back to the electricity grid, and the Isle of Man didn't have a similar structure. So it was put in place for those reasons. Probably from my perspective, there is limited value in that energy. There is a view by others that green energy is more valuable than non-green energy, but if we can't actually sell it for a meaningfully more higher price, it's not really more valuable. And what we've seen in the last few years is whilst we've always tried to help customers install renewable generation, private generation, which matches their requirements, because of things like the reduction in cost of solar panels and the equipment which goes with it, we've seen customers installing generation which is multiple times larger than their demand. So on the one hand, we're having to pay more for energy than we can buy on the market, despite it not really being any more valuable to us. And then on the other hand, we're having bigger fluctuations in power flows on the network, because somebody who's installing a solar array 4 times larger than they actually need, during the summer will be exporting quite a lot of energy to us because they won't be using it. But then in terms of network planning, come the winter, it won't be exporting very much at all. And so whereas historically we've been quite good at predicting customer demand and how much electricity we have to buy every day, either from the power station or from the UK, it's now much harder to predict because people are probably putting a bit extra on because of that export rate.
May I just add, just so having said all that, there is an increase in trend. So at the moment we've got about 1,000 customers who have got their own renewable energy installed. That's ever increasing. It's reported to the board, and it's something we're very mindful of for the reasons that Simon's just said. But at the moment, in terms of self-generation on the island, if you do it as a collective, it probably represents about 7 megawatts. It's fairly significant and it's growing. So we need to be mindful of how that interfaces with the grid and the impacts on the grid and the impacts on the financial pricing strategy as well. So we've got 2 sustainable generation tariffs, one for domestic and one for businesses, and they are being used. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry, we just need to go back. We just reflecting back on the existing interconnector. There has been talk of the requirement for a new interconnector. Is that now a settled part of the plans going forward? And if so, what's the expected cost of that connector likely to be?
You want me to take it?
I'll start it. You do the second. So basically, this plan is evolving, and as we said before, we're trying to optimise the amount of upfront investment. There are alternatives. So in the older pre-crisis days, all the assumptions that were made, all the modelling that was done, all the reports that were published, everything was all about a second interconnector, so you're quite right. In the changed world, I think the expectation of that interconnector at the time was probably circa £100 million. With what's happened since the energy crisis, with interest rates, with supply chain problems, you could probably double that. So we have, in terms of optimization, you've also got an opportunity potentially to interface with an offshore wind farm. So is it worth, that won't happen by 2030, but is it worth waiting to see what emerges there? And there are other more economic options anyway. So it's still being looked at. We're still doing feasibility work on it. But it's probably not the front runner. It's still in the basket of options that we're looking at, it's still there. It doesn't look like it's the front runner at the moment.
Okay,
If that makes sense.
Just to build on that, because you mentioned offshore wind farms, so if you're going to get more technical, there is only one offshore wind farm inside our territorial seas. Can we then assume that you have been talking to Ørsted about the interconnector and the offshore wind farm? Is that assumption that's made?
That's correct.
And then the second point is, do you know everything about the Ørsted wind farm agreement for lease and future lease and so on? Because I've got a question that's unanswered since the 24th of September about very basic questions about the agreement for lease, like who signed it and how long it's for. Have you actually seen the agreement for lease? Are you fully involved in?
So we're not involved in that at all. What the conversation we've had with Ørsted is this is an opportunity to explore. So let's explore it. We've exchanged data. Some of it is quite sensitive, especially from an Ørsted point of view. So it's under an NDA, but it is purely focused on: is there an opportunity to connect an offshore wind farm into the Manx grid, and if so, what would be the commercial arrangements? And they're quite early discussions, really.
Thank you. Next question then is: can you describe your gas wholesale agreement with Isle of Man Energy Group? Or with Islands Energy Group, or whatever it is with?
Well, whatever they want to call themselves this week. There was previously there was a Chief Minister's working group on gas regulation, I think.
I chaired that, yeah.
I think you did. And I think Appendix 2 of that report sets out a lot of the arrangements.
You keep walking into tracks. We were going to ask you whether you might update that appendix for us, because we found it very, very, very helpful, and we thought for clarity in this, we were going to try and sneak it in if you walked into it, and you have just done, so it would be lovely to actually update that appendix.
So it might be quite quick to update. So generally the arrangements are very very similar to that. In very broad terms, we buy gas and a number of services on behalf of what I will stick with calling Manx Gas Limited, because that's the last time I checked was still the local entity's name. So we buy things like the actual gas on instruction from them. We buy it on the wholesale market in the UK. We recharge it at cost to them. We buy things like shipping and transportation services on their behalf in the UK, and we recharge that at cost to them. There is the onshore high pressure pipelines, and there's something called the public gas supplier charge. So they pay that charge to us, which is intended to cover the operating costs.
But you will update the appendix then for us, and we can have that and publish that for you, after we've checked it and things with our report. Thank you very much.
Just supplementary to that, I mean, is there not some degree of financial risk involved in that arrangement?
There is financial risk. You will be aware that during the energy crisis, for 2 periods of time, Manx Gas chose not to pay us. I think that reached a level of debt of something like £12.5 million at one stage, which from my perspective is not fair on our electricity or water or wastewater customers to bear that that cost of non-payment. If thankfully Manx Gas chose to pay eventually, but that was never a foregone conclusion. Since that time, we have been discussing putting in place a new contract with Manx Gas. Currently, they are not willing to enter into a new contract, and the primary sticking point is around security and credit terms for payment.
So could they give you notice as well? Is that a financial risk to you if they all of a sudden give you notice and say, well, we'll bring the gas?
It's not a financial risk to me, because if they give me notice and they stop using our service, we might save a little bit of money. It won't cost us anything.
Okay.
If they buy 4 months worth of gas and then choose not to pay it, that is very much a financial risk, and the reason for wanting to tighten up on credit terms and put security arrangements in place.
Yeah.
And then the last question from me, I think, is, except for supplementaries, can you explain the relationship between the cost of energy generation and what the customer pays? Are changes in the amount the customer pays proportional to increases and decreases in the cost of energy production and particular parts of that cost? You know, have in mind the gas price, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be that you want to do that in writing, but you know, we are very interested, because there is obviously an MUA electricity pricing policy, and we just want to be able to explain very clearly what the connection is between the cost of energy generation and what the customer pays, and also how what the customer pays is proportional to changes, varies when there are changes in the key costs. Could be that it's already in the appendix, and you can.
So it's broadly. When you refer to an appendix, the gas.
Oh, this is about the electricity. This is the cost of energy generation, and the customer pays for electricity. That's what you meant with the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that annex to that
doesn't really go.
Doesn't really apply. The pricing strategy documents we publish on our website do apply. What our strategy was pre-energy crisis was to try and limit tariff increases to inflationary amounts. As you allude to, things like wholesale energy costs constantly go up and down, and we wanted to try and smooth that out from customers, so they wouldn't have half a year where their electricity bill's gone up, half a year where it's gone down, and then half a year where it's gone back up again. So that's been our intent. Before the energy crisis, we'd done modelling about can we sort of, you could say, smooth out the peaks and troughs, and we thought we could. Having said that, we did put a caveat in our pricing strategy to say if there were extreme gas price movements, we would have to move away from that, and unfortunately during the energy crisis we then had to rely on that. Gas prices have come down from the highs that we were experiencing during the energy crisis, but they're still around double what they were pre-energy crisis. The other thing we look at when we're setting our tariffs is we look at what's going on in the UK with the Ofgem price cap, and we've been trying to keep our tariffs around that level. So primarily we've been trying to stick with inflationary increases. We had to put, for want of a better term, a fuel cost adjustment on during the energy crisis. We took a small amount of that off last year. We would like to take more off, but what we don't want to do is take, you could say, more off that, and then the following month have to go back to customers and say, actually, we now need to put it back on again. So we are trying to get the tariffs down. We haven't managed to do it as much as we would like so far.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We are slightly over our allotted time. So I'm there's just a few questions I think you've probably already covered, to be honest, in responses so far. So I'm going to go to one here about the committee has had sight of an audit advisory report which was produced on time management and non-standard hours. Has the Manx Utilities Board read that report?
So that report would have gone to our Audit and Risk Committee. It wouldn't have gone to the full main board.
So perhaps I could direct this question then to, I believe, Peter, you said you were the chair of the Audit Board. Yeah. Could you perhaps tell us what's been done about the areas of concern that have been identified in that report?
I couldn't tell you actually at the moment because that's still being reviewed as I understand. So I could probably give you a written answer if that, because we're actually meeting next week.
Right, okay.
So if that would be adequate for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think that one's clearly answered? I think it is, isn't it?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I would go back there if you've got another 5 minutes.
I think we're 5 minutes.
I'll come back to pricing in a minute if you don't mind, but just wanted to ask, and I gave a bit of a warning about curtailment, because I'm not sure I understand curtailment. So I wanted to, this is in the context of Erie Stain, potential for Erie Stain and generation. I just wanted to hear, from the Manx Utilities, what the position is on curtailment, because that's an often discussed topic.
Yeah, so in simple terms, when you've got a wealth of inputs to a grid system, then where there's more supply than demand, then you need to curtail the amount of generation that is allowed onto the grid. So that's particularly relevant in the UK and their grid system, where they have a lot of generation of wind generation, particularly in Scotland. Not all of it can get onto the grid, and it depends on the individual price supplied or offered by the operators of those power stations. In our context, we're talking about a singular power station which will be operated by us, and with all of the other elements of the power system that we can offer work in tandem with that, we don't anticipate a high degree of curtailment. So when you hear people talking about the fact that the capacity factors of the proposed wind farm will not achieve what Manx Utilities says it will, I think their point is based on data relating to a regulated market in the UK and not the Isle of Man.
So is my summary then a Manx Utilities position that because the generation from Erie Stain is lower than the amount that you use on the island, there won't be any curtailment? That's the gist of it. And so is the target, so therefore the 30 megawatts target, or 20 megawatts or whatever it is, that's the target without any curtailment ever. So if there is curtailment, we won't get to that 30 megawatts. You're not targeting something greater than 30 megawatts and then being curtailed downwards. So curtailment is never, there's no, it's broken down or there's industrial action. That doesn't fit into curtailment. Your definition of curtailment is just being turned off.
So my understanding of the way that the regulated market in the UK is, curtailment is about constraining somebody off, even though they're available, because the demand side just can't accommodate that amount of supply.
Okay. So any other disruptions in supply are disruptions in supply, but they're not curtailed supply.
And I mean, there are nuances on that, unless there is a particular supply circuit that's failed. That's a fault. But the generator is still available. Again, they would get some compensation payment for that.
And then in terms of pricing, just to go back on Simon's very helpful answer, obviously what you see as your retail customer is the electricity price basically goes up by inflation for the next 5 years, and that's what it did for the last 5 years, whereas the oil and gas prices do relate to the wholesale price. So I do think we are, the public is sort of owed a bit more of an explanation, because I remember when the pricing policy went through Tynwald last, you did say if there was a big drop in gas price, or if alternative energy meant that the wholesale wholesale generation costs were much lower, that would be fed through to the customer, but that isn't really explicit how that's going to happen inside the pricing policy. So I just think, we need to give you a chance to explain that a bit more clearly, because the gas price really has tumbled. I think it might even be a sixth of what it was at the top, at the absolute top. But the electricity price hasn't gone down by.
Yeah, and we didn't increase our electricity price by 6 times. So certainly one of the challenges I have up in prices. So ours haven't fallen by as much because they didn't go up by as much.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, we would like to take more of a fuel cost adjustment off. We would like to get back to closer to pre-energy price or energy crisis levels. It's been very difficult from a sort of a wholesale energy cost market. I think the last 2 months have been relatively flat, which is probably the first time it's been flat for about 2 months.
Okay.
For several years. But what we do is we have an internal meeting every quarter, and we look at a number of factors like electricity demand, like the off-gen price cap, where the wholesale prices are, and we are formally reviewing it every quarter to try and take it off when we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to bring to our attention at this point?
I think so. No, thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
In that case, all that remains is to thank you for your time today and for your answers. The committee will now sit